What's up, everybody? Matt Gajewski here, back again with the Awesemo Fantasy Football YouTube channel. And today we have a full first round mock draft ahead of the 2022 NFL Draft. Before we get started, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when this and all other content goes live. We're also brought to you today by Underdog Fantasy. If you've never heard of Underdog Fantasy, they're changing the fantasy industry. They have everything from best ball drafts, live drafts, pick'em contests where you can win up to 20 extra entry fee. If you use the promo code Awesemo today, you are going to get a match deposit bonus up to $100. So make sure to check out Underdog Fantasy. Diving into the mock draft, we are going to go through all 32 picks, talk about team fits, and overall just what we can expect from this year's first round of the NFL Draft. And where I want to start things off is pick number 1, which has gotten a little juicy in the last couple days. Early this week, we had Aiden Hutchinson as the favorite to come off the board, number 1, but those odds have actually flipped. And now it is Travonne Walker coming out of Georgia, who's widely expected to be the number 1 pick. He is the betting favorite for this right now. And there's a lot to be said about this. Jacksonville holds this pick, and they're a team that does have a need along the edge. So the pick overall makes sense. Walker is an extremely athletic prospect. He stands 6'5", 272 pounds, ran the 4.51 40-yard dash, and their GM, Trent Mcduffie, has a history of drafting a lot of these highly athletic edge players. So he does make a lot of sense here. And overall, Jacksonville with this pick, I think they go edge. Right now, if I was a betting man, I probably wouldn't lay the juice, but it does seem taking the steam late this week, Travonne Walker is the favorite to be the number 1 overall pick. And at pick number 2, Detroit. That leaves the hometown kid, Aiden Hutchinson, coming out of Michigan. The fit makes a lot of sense here for Detroit. They've been rumored to like this prospect all throughout the process. He's playing in the same state already as a Wolverine, and now the fit with Detroit makes a lot of sense on their very weak pass rushing unit. The Lions were bottom 3 in sacks last year. Hutchinson racked up 14 sacks in that final season with Michigan. He has good athleticism. He didn't test in the same categories like a Travonne Walker, but more than serviceable here. Overall, Detroit, it's a no-brainer. You'll see them mocked quarterback at times. The value just doesn't make sense for a team that has so many needs right now with a weak quarterback class. So Aiden Hutchinson is the pick at number 2. Where things get really interesting, Houston Texans at number 3, and they could go a variety of ways. They've been mocked receiver a lot. I wouldn't be terribly surprised to see one come off the board here, but they need a lot of help on defense, and they now have a defensive-minded head coach in Lovie Smith. So corner's been someplace they've been mocked. They've done a lot of work on like Stingley and Sauce Gardner, but ultimately they are a team with a lot of needs as well. They just take the best available player along the edge with Kayvon Thibodeaux coming out of Oregon. He's a player with some character concerns, allegedly. I don't know this personally, obviously, but that is the rumor coming out of the NFL brass. And he's a player that's a 3-year starter, one of the highest recruits in Oregon history. And now Lovie Smith hopefully can take some of those character concerns and squash them overall with Kayvon Thibodeaux. And again, this makes a lot of sense. When you look at the Texans roster, they might have the worst defensive line in football, with Okoronkwo and Grenard, Derek Rivers. I mean, Ross Blacklock was the guy the previous regime drafted on the defensive line. Malik Collins comes over, but man, they need as much help as they can get. And with their pass rush, Kayvon Thibodeaux fills an immediate need. The Jets at 4, they have 2 top 10 picks, so they have the luxury of potentially letting some players fall here. And they got the quarterback of the future last year in Zach Wilson. So they are the first team to take receiver. Now, they could go offensive line here, but I think receiver is the more immediate need, getting those extra pass catchers for Zach Wilson. They obviously took Elijah Moore last year, who missed a bit of the season due to injury, but they can always add more help. And Garrett Wilson is the first receiver drafted here. Wilson's not the biggest player. He comes out of Ohio State, 6 feet tall, 183 pounds, but he is a burner, ran the 4.38 40-yard dash. And his size does give him a little more ability to play on the outside, something we saw Elijah Moore do at times, but he's more of a slot weapon. So Garrett Wilson, the elite numbers he produced right away on the field with Ohio State stand out to me. was a producer even as a freshman alongside players like Chris Olave and future first-rounder Jackson Smith-Njigba. Makes a lot of sense for the Jets. And the last thing I'll say about wide receivers, there's a need for this position. They are getting astronomical money on the open market, and there's a lot of receiver-needy teams, particularly in the back half of the first round. Expect a lot of interest in these guys very early on in the drafts, and that is a common theme we will talk about throughout the show. Going to number 5, we have the New York Giants on the other side of New York, a team that is reportedly still in on Daniel Jones, a team that spent a ton on receiver last year. Now, Kadarius Toney may be moved, but if Kadarius Toney is still in town, they also have Sterling Shepard back. They also have Kenny Golladay. Don't think receiver is a big option here, but they can always bolster the offensive line. A weaker unit for this team throughout the past few years. They've done a lot drafting Andrew Thomas, but they can always add more. And Evan Neal's a prospect that makes a lot of sense. Multi-year starter at Alabama, 6'8", 337 pounds, 34-inch arms. He did not test at the combine, but we know he is athletic for this kind of size. With Daniel Jones being mediocre, to say the least, throughout the early part of his career, getting him all the help they possibly can makes a lot of sense. Not to mention this would benefit former second overall pick Saquon Barkley, too, coming off the injury. At number 6, we have Carolina. Carolina is allegedly trying to trade back, and I think that makes sense. They're a team that doesn't have a second or third round pick. They're just not the type of roster that can really draft a quarterback right now and compete. So could they bolster their assets and take more players in a trade back situation? Sure, but without mocking trades, assuming they pick here, they take an immediate need on the offensive line, and they take Ike Ekwonu, and he's likely to be the first tackle off the board based on where you see the odds in betting markets. But Evan Neal, just being the polished prospect, I think could make some sense there. Overall, the fit with Carolina, I mean, this team just has a lot of needs on offense. You have DJ Moore, the number 1 receiver, but you still don't have a quarterback there. Whatever you tried out, whether it's Sam Darnold, maybe they trade for a Baker Mayfield, something like that, they do need help pass protecting. So Carolina, they might not be the best fit for a tackle at this point, but ultimately they have so many needs overall that it just makes sense at some point to take the best player available with the roster they do have. We're talking Cameron Irving and Taylor Moton, Pat Elflein, Bradley Bozeman, Austin Corbett along the offensive line. Wherever Ekwonu fits, he's just the best player available for them. At number 7, the Giants are back on the clock here. 2 top 10 picks for the Giants. We already got them a tackle, and now we are going to take best available player in Sauce Gardner. Mocked as high as number 3 at times. Sauce Gardner, he didn't produce a lot in college, but we can't take anything away from him from that. Opposing offenses just did not target Gardner at all. He never allowed a touchdown in college. He has good size, 6'3", 190, 4.41 speed. This guy fills an immediate need for the Giants. And my goodness, this cornerback unit is one of the worst in football. And they've been rumored to want to move on from James Bradbury too. So if that were to happen, Sauce Gardner, man, he would just give them a lot of flexibility on the back end. Not to mention, you could play him anywhere alongside Bradbury, Adoree Jackson, if that's the way their secondary shakes out in year 1. Going to Atlanta at pick 8, they move on from Matt Ryan. They sign stopgap Marcus Mariota. So they seem to be out on quarterback, maybe a dark horse there. They have Kyle Pitts, the athletic receiver / tight end, but they lost Calvin Ridley. So the second receiver comes off the board here. It is Jameson Williams out of Alabama. Widely reported early in the process to maybe be a pick in the teens or the 20s, but we've gotten a lot of positive reporting on the injury. Jameson Williams out of Alabama tears the ACL in the college football playoff, but he's ahead of schedule in maybe when we thought he could redshirt year 1. That information has now changed to him maybe missing somewhere between 2 to 4 games. So Williams potentially playing this rookie season should thrust him up boards. Obviously didn't test with the ACL, but he is a player with the best speed in the class. And he racked up 1,572 yards on 79 catches with Bama. Only concern, he couldn't beat out Smith-Njigba, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson at Ohio State, but can't take that away from him. Those are 3 first-rounders in the Ohio State offense. And it's not like he transferred to a G5 school. He goes to Alabama and he puts up nearly 1,600 yards. Good fit for Atlanta here. Whatever quarterback they go with in the future, he will be a phenomenal option. Seattle at 9. They obviously lose Russell Wilson, have a lot of needs on this team, full rebuild for them. And they take best available edge, Jermaine Johnson. Jermaine Johnson, he's a transfer to Florida State, but he fills an immediate need. He's 6'5", 254, logged 12 sacks, ran a 4.58 40-yard dash, took home ACC Defensive Player of the Year honors. And it wasn't for a lack of talent. He transferred out of Georgia. It was just there so deep, and he wanted to play. And that's exactly what happened, and it benefited him. Against Seattle, they have not been capable on the defensive line for a while now, and they fill in a unit that basically is just Shelby Harris, Darnell Taylor, Uchenna Nwosu. They definitely missed on LJ Collier in the first round a few years ago, so it fills an immediate need for Seattle. Going to the Jets at 10, they already took receiver, and now they come back with maybe the biggest wild card in the draft process, Derek Stingley out of LSU. We know why Stingley has fallen a little bit here. He basically has played limited snaps the last 2 years, but when we saw him as a true freshman at LSU, he might have been considered among the best cornerback prospects we've ever seen, not just because of age, but because of the conference he's playing in, because of the players he faced every day in practice. We're talking Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Terrace Marshall, and he played well against them. Luckily, we got some positive news at the LSU Pro Day. Derek Stingley ran a 4.44 40-yard dash. When we combine the athleticism, his rare production as a freshman, and now maybe the clean bill of health, he's rising up boards. Like the Giants, the Jets also are a little lacking in the secondary. When we look at what this team could trot out this year, he fills an immediate need. Their cornerback room consists of Bryce Hall, a former Virginia player, Brennan Eccles, a former Kentucky player. These aren't the best draft picks. DJ Reed, Michael Carter, not the running back Michael Carter, the cornerback Michael Carter, so you can already tell it is not the best defensive back room, fills an immediate need for the Jets. Washington Commanders at 11 seemingly already filled their quarterback need. Carson Wentz, think what you will of that, but they're going in on him. So what better way to go all in on your quarterback than surround him with a receiver? Drake London comes off the board here to the Commanders. Drake London, similar to Jameson Williams coming off the injury, had an ankle injury late in the season, but he played 8 games, and he racked up over 1,000 yards in just 8 games played. He's 6'4", 219. We didn't get any testing numbers for Drake London, and that is a concern to some, but he looked quite athletic to me on the field. A lot of people might also knock him for being a contested catch receiver. That's not the only way he produced. They actually used him a lot on screens and underneath throws where they could get the ball in his hands, get yards after catch, and that speaks to the athleticism, in my opinion. Right now, he complements Terry McLaurin, and he gives Carson Wentz another weapon in this offense, which still has a long ways to go. Pick number 12, Minnesota's a really interesting team to look at with the new regime coming in, likely to take an analytical approach, and in this mock draft, they get maybe the most athletic human being to ever enter the NFL in Georgia's Jordan Davis, and that's a very high praise for a defensive lineman. But Jordan Davis is 6'6", 341 pounds, and he ran a 4.78 40-yard dash. Jumped 32 inches in the vertical at standing nearly 350 pounds. It cannot be overstated how athletic this prospect is. The concerns with Davis, he never played a full allotment of snaps at Georgia, but he never needed to. It's a defensive line that had 3 first-rounders and likely additional future first-rounders too. So the limited snaps make sense. You could keep every one of these guys fresh. He's going to be a tools-based, sort of an analytical prospect here that makes sense for the Minnesota interior defensive line. Long are the days where this was the best unit in the NFC North. When we look at their interior defensive line now, they do have Dalvin Tomlinson, Aaron Watts, but most of their talent is on the edges with players like Zadarius Smith. He would be a nice run stuffer up front with potential to push the pocket as a pass rusher. Going to the Texans at 13, they're back on the clock again. They already took Kayvon Thibodeau, best defensive prospect on the board when they picked, and now they add more help to Davis Mills with Chris Olave coming out of Ohio State, the second receiver for this offense off the board. He's much different than Garrett Wilson, even though he actually stands pretty similar in terms of height and weight. These guys are actually both 6 feet, around 185 pounds. Olave, sub 4.4 40-yard dash as well, but he plays in a different style than Garrett Wilson. He's going to be your route running savant. And that is something that we could see benefit the Texans with Davis Mills at quarterback. That offense already has Brandon Cook signed, so he's their deep threat. They have Nico Collins, who's a bigger bodied receiver, profiles as their X. When you look at the Z position and just finding somebody that can create separation for a young quarterback in Mills, Chris Olave makes a lot of sense. And based on that route running, 4-year starter at Ohio State, not 4-year starter, 4-year producer, he makes sense as an immediate player that can contribute to the offense. At 14, the Ravens are on the clock, kind of a weird spot for them here, and they draft offensive line with the falling Charles Cross. Now, this is probably not the fit that everybody thinks. Baltimore is not necessarily a high pass rate team, and Charles Cross, coming out of Mississippi State, is playing for that air raid under Mike Leach. So he might have more overall pass blocking reps than anyone in this class. But at this point in the draft at 14, he's simply just the best player on the board. And the Ravens can't afford to let him go. He makes sense based on some of the departures this offense has seen in recent years. They're projected to get Ronnie Stanley back. We've gotten some good updates on him overall just in the rehab process. They have Morgan Moses now, still Zeitler on the inside. But even early on in the process, they could use Charles Cross on the interior if they want, with maybe the projection in the future that he goes to the outside at a tackle position with some development. But overall, this is just a best available player situation with Orlando Brown out of the picture now, adding to the tackle depth for the Baltimore Ravens. Going to pick 15, we have Philadelphia on the clock. A very interesting offense. I think this team could make the playoffs. I'm not sure how likely they are to compete with Jalen Hurts under center. I think he would likely need to take a step forward. And there's a chance that Philadelphia is already prepping with some of the draft capital they've acquired next year to take a shot on one of the guys that we see in the next year's class. So what better way to surround a future quarterback and honestly Jalen Hurts if he pans out than draft a receiver? And the best receiver on the board at this point is Treylon Burks. He is a different prospect than some of the guys at the top. He's 6'2", 225. He had 66 catches for 1,104 yards last year. Didn't test as well as some people expected in the 4.5s with the 40-yard dash. But when we look at GPS tracking data available, this is a guy that was widely tracked above 20 miles an hour, squashing some of those speed concerns. He does have legitimate high-end speed. He didn't produce like some of the receivers in this class either. A lot on screens, a lot from the slot. But another player we saw do that was A.J. Brown. Just because an offensive coordinator uses someone in the slot doesn't mean it's a knock. Sometimes offensive coordinators simply want to get their best playmakers the ball as quickly and as easily as possible, and the slot oftentimes offers that. That's what happened with Treylon Burks. At this point in the draft, we have 5 receivers in the top 15. Like we mentioned above, don't be surprised to see this. We have a lot of receiver-needy teams. I think some could even trade up. We're not doing trades in this spot, but right now we have receivers to the Jets. They need a receiver overall. The Falcons replacing Ridley. We have Drake London to the Commanders. They definitely need a complement to Terry McLaurin. Then we have Olave to the Texans. They definitely need receiver. And then Burks to Philadelphia. Even when we look behind these teams, the Saints need help at receiver at 16 and 19. The Eagles pick at 18 again if they wait. You have the Patriots at 21. They certainly need a complement to Jacoby Myers. The Packers let go of Devontae Adams. They have 2 picks. We have the Bills with the potential to make a luxury pick at 25, and then the Chiefs at 29 and 30, trying to replace Tyreek Hill. Essentially, half the teams in the first round haven't needed this position. One of my favorite bets is over 6 receivers in the first round, and don't be surprised if 5 come off the board in the top 15. Going to the Saints at 16, they missed the run on receiver, and it's just not a position they can reach on at this point. They've been widely mocked to take QBs, but the value doesn't match up here. And honestly, Jameis Winston's better than any of the prospects in this class. So they surround Jameis Winston, get him some protection, try to find that replacement to Teron Armstead. It's Trevor Penning. He's going to be the tackle of the future here. Interesting player coming out of Northern Iowa. He's 6'7", 325 pounds, athletic, a 4'8", 40-yard dash. And luckily, we got to see Penning at the Senior Bowl where he squashed some of those level of competition concerns. Just best available player here for the Saints. At 17, the Chargers are on the clock. Sort of a luxury pick here. They have been able to spend copious amounts of money in free agency, bolstering their defense. And they already have Justin Herbert. They bring back Mike Williams, so receiver, not a huge need. They can make a luxury pick here and maybe find a starter in the future and tackle Bernard Raymond, coming out of Central Michigan. There's a lot of meat left on the bone with him as a prospect. He's 6'6", 303 pounds, not the heaviest, but he is a converted tight end, and he made that transition in college. Because of the tight end background, he brings elite athleticism, and he still has the potential to add weight and grow into this position, not just from a body weight perspective, but from a technique perspective. He might come off the board a little later than this, but don't be surprised if the Chargers, who have needs along the offensive line, make a luxury pick in Bernard Raymond here. At 18, Eagles are back on the clock, still looking to bolster this offense after getting Treylon Burks. They make an interior offensive lineman pick in Zion Johnson. Right now, the receivers are gone. They've dried up, but we have Boston College's Zion Johnson as an elite interior prospect. He's 6'3", 312, started 49 career games. We've seen the Eagles' offensive line struggle at times. It can also be a unit of strength, but it's not the deepest. So a way to prepare for the future with some of the exiting players and some of the older players in this offense, you can see them take a look towards the future with Zion Johnson, and they've taken this approach at multiple times. They took Andre Dillard when there was already a position of strength, and the same thing went with Landon Dickerson last year. Zion Johnson provides depth at the least and could be a future starter for this team. Saints are back on the clock at 19. We already mentioned Jameis Winston just being simply better than any of the fringe signal callers in this class. The Saints have a lot of needs, so you could see them look towards the edge here with Purdue's George Karlaftis. With the Saints, it's not an immediate need necessarily. They still have Cameron Jordan, Marcus Davenport, but Cameron Jordan is getting up there in age. They have Peyton Turner as an heir apparent, but as you can tell, it's been a theme with New Orleans. They prioritize the edges, and Karlaftis, he fills this not only want, but potential need with Jordan aging. Karlaftis had 14.5 sacks and 30.5 tackles for loss in his career with the Boilermakers on a defense that really didn't have much talent. He's getting double teams, and he's still producing despite it. Karlaftis makes sense here. At pick 20, despite everything we've said about the quarterback position being weak, it's likely that positional value still thrust at least 2, maybe 3 into the first round. The Steelers are a team with a history of ignoring analytics and conventional wisdom. We saw that last year, drafting Najee Harris in the first round. They take the upside with Malik Willis coming out of Liberty at quarterback here. Willis is an elite athlete. He had over 800 yards in back-to-back seasons. Didn't test as far as a 40-yard dash because he didn't need to. We already know he's an elite athlete. But he struggled to produce as a passer against a weak level of competition at Liberty. That's a concern. But overall, the arm strength is there. The athleticism is there. The Steelers have Mitch Trubisky as a stopgap. They can maybe sit Willis if they want, and he's likely to come off the board in the first round based on the positional value. Malik Willis comes off the board to the Steelers. New England, a sneaky team to consider offense here. They could definitely use help at receiver, but again, they missed the first run. So looking at where they could go, offensive line has been a position they always look towards the future, similar to the Philadelphia Eagles. And when we look at their offensive line right now, it's still a position of strength, I would say, but protecting their young quarterback, Mac Jones, needs to be a priority, not just in terms of starters, but depth as well. So drafting towards the future with Tyler Smith makes sense to me. Tyler Smith is an interesting prospect. He doesn't maybe have the best size. He's 6'5", 324, but arm length might be an issue here. The Patriots have a history of drafting undersized linemen. Isaiah Wynn stands out. And I mean, mainly from a length perspective, not necessarily just overall size. But Smith is a multi-year starter here, very productive in college. The Patriots have the luxury of maybe not needing him right away outside of injuries. So look towards the future with Tyler Smith. Green Bay's on the clock at 22. Wouldn't be surprised if they try to trade up for one of the big 5 expected to come off the board early. But in this mock, no trades. They miss out on the run. So I want to highlight the expectation that multiple receivers come off the board in the 20s, despite what happens with the big 5. Sky Moore out of Western Michigan goes to Green Bay at 22. Again, Eagles, Saints, Patriots, Chiefs, they all have needs at receiver. So I expect Sky Moore to be a first rounder. He's 5'10", 195 pounds, ran a 4.41 40-yard dash, almost 2,500 receiving yards in his career with Western Michigan. And remember, Western Michigan in the MAC played a shortened COVID season in the second most recent year. Sky Moore likely has nearly 3,000 receiving yards if that doesn't occur. He's built a little bit like Golden Tate, and he provides elite speed. He actually ran a faster 40-yard dash than Jahan Dotson. And this team lost Devontae Adams. They lost Marquez Valdez-Scantling. They even lost some ancillary players like Equanimeous St. Brown. Sky Moore provides a deep threat that the offense is lacking right now. They have Alan Lazard as a possession receiver, Sammy Watkins. He could be your X or Z. Sky Moore is a vertical threat that the offense needs. Makes a lot of sense for the Packers at 22. At 23, Arizona finds themselves finally sliding Kyle Hamilton coming out of Notre Dame. Safety is a position I want to focus on a little bit here. I think there's a chance that safeties fall in this draft, and there's a couple reasons why. One, Kyle Hamilton, before the draft, NFL Combine, I should say, he was expected to maybe be a top 5 pick, but he tested poorly. The safety class is strong. We have a lot of good players like Daxton Hill you could get on day 2. And overall, the position is devalued. So don't be surprised if teams, not just where we've seen come off the board so far, but teams trading up for maybe a QB, receivers, corners, tackles, positions of strength, but also maybe not the deepest, they could be prioritized over safety for the said reasons. But Kyle Hamilton, he's been an elite producer since he stepped on the field with Notre Dame. Good coverage skills. He will step in alongside Budda Baker to complement a secondary that widely overachieved last year. At 24, we have the Dallas Cowboys on the clock. We know Jones loves to take his receivers, but at this point just doesn't match up to the value here. Once the best offensive line in football, this position is now at least a need at a couple positions on the offensive line for Dallas. They take Texas A&M Kenyon Green, plug-and-play starter here for them at guard, maybe tackle, but probably a guard here. He's 6'4", 323, started 3 straight years in the SEC for Texas A&M. He just makes a lot of sense for an offensive line that's lost a lot of players and also dealt with injury to a lot of their studs. At 25, we have the Buffalo Bills, a bit of a luxury pick for the Bills that bring back a pretty complete roster. A lot of people are mocking Breece Hall here to kind of complete the roster. We saw Kansas City fail doing this with Clyde Edwards-Helaire a few years ago. The Bills are analytically sound, and I find it hard to believe that they would take a devalued position in the first round at 25 when you could maybe trade back and get a Kenneth Walker later. So I'm not giving them Breece Hall. I'm going to take a position of strength, a position of high value. It is cornerback, and it is Andrew Booth coming out of Clemson. Does have some injury concerns, didn't test, but he's 6 feet, 194 pounds. He started 2 seasons for Clemson, has the elite production, and he is a name we've seen rise up the draft process when we look at the last few weeks, expecting some of these corners to come off the board towards the end of round 1. So Booth is somebody that goes to the Bills here at 25. 26, we have the Tennessee Titans. Bit of a wild card team, but we've recently seen them mocked quarterback a lot, and I think this is actually a sneaky possibility here with Kenny Pickett at 26 coming out of Pittsburgh. The Titans can move on from Ryan Tannehill next season and save a ton of money against the cap. Ryan Tannehill hasn't quite produced at that elite level, and in 2021, he took a massive step back. When you can save that much money and get maybe an arguable comparable talent in Kenny Pickett, makes a lot of sense here. Pickett, as a college player at Pitt, was more of a one-hit wonder. He's a multi-year starter, but he only had the 1 season of elite production. It came alongside receivers like Jordan Addison, who won the Biletnikoff, and a strong offensive system with Mark Whipple and a much better offensive line. So there are concerns, but again, multiple quarterbacks likely to come off the board in the first round because of positional value. Titans grab one with Kenny Pickett. 27, we have the Bucs, and we have Devonte Wyatt, the third Georgia defensive lineman to come off the board. Devonte Wyatt will play alongside Vita Vea here. He's 6'3", 304 pounds. Elite athleticism, 4.77 40-yard dash, which is overshadowed only by his teammate. But overall, Wyatt has the production. He has the athleticism. And it's a bit of a luxury pick for Tampa Bay. I think you could see them go multiple directions, but their roster's fairly complete overall. They are a dark horse to maybe get a receiver at this point. Godwin coming off the injury. They lost Antonio Brown, but I think they've addressed some of those concerns in free agency. Overall, defensive line is a position we've seen them take in the first round before. And that's a position they prioritize because it allows them to do a lot with their coverage unit on the back end. At 28, we have Green Bay back on the clock. They addressed receiver by reaching on Sky Moore. I think you could see even Sky Moore come off the board at this particular pick if Green Bay decides to wait. But at 28, they now have the luxury of taking best available player Devin Lloyd. And I have Devin Lloyd sliding in this mock draft for some of the reasons we talked about with Kyle Hamilton. Positions of strength and high value in this draft are a little bit scarce. There's good high-end talent, but it's not the deepest. We're talking receiver, corner, offensive line. I think teams trade up for those players with the idea that safety and linebacker are deeper, even though we do have elite producers. Still, with that said, Devin Lloyd's production cannot be discounted at Utah. As a senior, he had 22 tackles for loss, 8 sacks, 10 passes defended, 4 interceptions. He ran a 4.66 40-yard dash at nearly 240 pounds. Production off the charts for Green Bay. It's a position they've neglected for a while. They shore up their linebackers here with Utah's Devin Lloyd. At 29, the Chiefs are on the clock. They desperately need receivers. They kind of try to fill the Tyreek Hill role with Marquez Valdes-Scantling, but he's certainly not enough. They go Jahan Dotson from Penn State at wide receiver here. Again, Dotson's smaller and slower than Sky Moore, but he still is 5'11", 178 pounds, ran a 4.43 40-yard dash, and he is an elite producer at Penn State. So he's a player I think that makes a lot of sense here for just a team that has to try to find a way to replace Tyreek Hill at this point. And I don't think Marquez Valdes-Scantling by himself is the answer. So Dotson comes out of Penn State to the Chiefs at 29. The Chiefs are right back up on the clock here at 30, and their roster is pretty solid outside receiver too. One player they might have the luxury of taking is Trent McDuffie, who slides a bit here at corner, comes out of Washington. He was supposed to be a top 10-ish pick before the combine, but he checked in smaller and slower, just less athletic than we thought overall. He's 5'11", 193 pounds, 4.44 40-yard dash, really short arms, so some teams might view him as a slot-only corner, and that's an issue in the first round and a potential reason why he might fall. Again, it only takes one team to fall in love with the production, but if he's off a lot of teams' boards, don't be surprised if a slide happens. The Chiefs get a highly productive player here and one that could benefit just from playing in the slot right away. We'll see what happens with the Chiefs secondary, but Tyrann Mathieu hasn't come back, and he's somebody that could maybe fill that slot corner need. At 31, we have Super Bowl runner-up in Cincinnati. They're on the clock. Cincinnati has a lot of needs along the offensive line, but we saw them bandage that a little bit in free agency. With most of the talent gone on the offensive line at this point outside of just the interior, the Bengals might decide to go a different route. And I have them taking edge here. And Boye Mafe coming out of Minnesota, 6'4", 261, ran a 4.53 40-yard dash, and that athleticism has caused Mafe to be a huge riser in the process. He wasn't the greatest producer at Minnesota, but again, similar to Karlaftis, that's just a defense without a lot of talent. Opposing offenses can hone in on the best players, and sometimes that can mitigate some of the overall production numbers. But when you look at pressures, Mafe, he's right there with some of the better numbers in this class. At 32, Detroit is back on the clock. I think you could see a team try to trade back up into the first round, maybe get a fifth year on a quarterback. You could see, a couple teams that already did not take quarterback in this class do that. But overall, the Lions stick with the pick here. They're also a candidate to take a quarterback, but the talent's not there. And instead, I think we see a receiver come off the board. Another position of immense need here. The Lions, they bring in DJ Chark, but they still have needs at receiver. So North Dakota State's Christian Watson comes off the board. Maybe not a first rounder in terms of production, but certainly a first rounder in terms of athleticism. He's 6'4", 208 pounds, ran a 4.36 40-yard dash, which is just unbelievable. And some of the production woes aren't on him. He played for the FCS school, North Dakota State, who's one of the run-heaviest teams in the country. They like to get Christian Watson involved on reverses and jet sweep type plays, and then he produced when he was involved in the offense from a receiving perspective too. That just didn't happen a lot. But overall, this is the first round mock draft, 2022 NFL draft. Let me know in the comment section what you guys think, what I got right, what I got wrong, where you see some players coming off the board, and how you think your team did. I'm Matt Gajewski on Twitter at Matt_Gajewski. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again next time.